All right, welcome to another deep dive where we dig into all that fascinating research.
Yeah.
And yeah, we bring you the good stuff.
The fascinating stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So today, we're going deep into one of America's biggest unsolved mysteries, and that is the Zodiac Killer.
Ah,
This
yeah.
is based on the Biographics YouTube channel, Deep Dive on the Zodiac Killer. It's called the Zodiac Killer, America's most elusive killer. And we're talking late 60s, early 70s,
Right.
San Francisco Bay Area, that whole time of peace and love.
Yeah.
But lurking in the background is this terrifying shadow.
Right. And it's amazing how this shadow, this unknown figure, was able to create so much fear, just capture the public's attention through these brutal crimes, but also this really deliberate communication strategy.
Yeah, it's not just the murders themselves, right? But
Right.
the way the Zodiac used ciphers and letters to taunt the police, the media. It
Absolutely.
became this public and very unsettling spectacle.
Right.
So before we get to the ciphers themselves,
Yeah.
let's kind of walk through the confirmed attacks and get a sense of his modus operandi,
Right. Pattern.
his pattern of operation.
Yeah.
I always like saying modus operandi.
It sounds cool.
It does sound cool.
So the first attack, the one that kind of set the stage for all the terror to come, December 20th, 1968.
Okay.
Two teenagers, David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, they were on their first date parked on this secluded road known as Lake Herman Road,
Oh, wow.
and they were shot and killed.
Just heartbreaking. And I think for a lot of people, that image of young love just cut so tragically short.
Right.
It really cemented the Zodiac as this figure of dread.
Absolutely.
And he didn't stop there.
No.
6 months later, July 4th, 1969,
Okay.
he strikes again, attacking Michael Mageau and Darlene Farron at the Blue Rock Springs golf course.
Yeah.
Darlene was killed, but Michael survived.
Right.
And he's the only one that can give a first-hand account of what the Zodiac looked like.
Yeah, Mageau described him as a white male, probably in his late 20s or early 30s, stocky build, short brown hair. Kind of an ordinary description, which
Yeah.
just adds to the mystery.
He could be anyone,
Yeah, anyone.
lurking in plain sight.
Exactly.
And then things take an even weirder turn.
Right.
Just a few weeks later, 3 Bay Area newspapers get these handwritten letters, each containing a part of a cipher,
Okay.
and this demand: publish the cipher,
Yeah.
or more blood will be spilled.
Wow.
These are the first of many communications he would send to the press.
Yeah.
It was this combination of threats, boasts, and strange symbols.
Right.
This persona that was so confusing and so terrifying.
Exactly.
And get this, a local school teacher and his wife,
Wow.
Donald and Betty Harden.
Okay.
They cracked the first cipher,
The 408.
the Z408.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is a big breakthrough.
Yeah.
You know, it offered this glimpse into his psyche, but it raised more questions than answers, I think.
Yeah.
The message was these misspelled ramblings, a chilling claim. I like killing people because it is so much fun. And then it mentions collecting slaves for the afterlife.
Oh, God.
Oh, and it ends with 18 characters that have never been deciphered.
So we have a killer who's clearly enjoying the attention he's playing games with the public, the police,
Absolutely.
and who appears to be motivated by, well, we don't know.
We don't know. Right.
Right. And just when you think it can't get any stranger,
Yeah.
September 27th, 1969, the Zodiac strikes again, this time attacking Cecilia Shepard and Brian Hartnell as they were picnicking at Lake Berryessa.
Wow.
This time he's wearing a hooded costume with his now infamous symbol on the front, and he leaves a message scrawled on the car door referencing the earlier murders.
So he's not only escalating in terms of his public persona,
Right.
but this attack shows a shift in his MO.
Yeah.
His first 2 attack shootings, now he's using a knife.
Interesting.
Huh.
What do you make of that?
Well, it's a question that investigators have been thinking about for years, you know?
Yeah.
Was it opportunity? Was it a deliberate change maybe to throw off investigators or just to see if he could get away with a different method?
Yeah. Whatever the reason, it adds to this unsettling nature of the case.
Absolutely.
And then just a couple weeks later, October 11th, 1969,
Okay.
the Zodiac claims his last confirmed victim,
Right.
Paul Stein, a San Francisco cab driver.
Yeah.
This attack was particularly shocking because it was in a busy urban area,
Right.
a huge contrast to his previous attacks in these secluded locations.
So the Zodiac, who had been targeting couples in isolated spots, was now operating with this new boldness, you know, striking in the heart of the city.
Yeah.
It raised questions about his motives and whether they were evolving? Did he want to create more fear? Was he testing the limits of what he could get away with?
Yeah.
We just don't know.
So by the end of 1969, the Zodiac had claimed 5 victims,
Right.
sent all these taunting letters and ciphers,
Yeah.
and become this source of fear and fascination for a whole region.
Yeah, for everyone.
But it doesn't end there.
It doesn't.
He'd continue to communicate with the media,
Yeah.
sending more ciphers,
Yeah.
including the infamous Z340,
Yeah.
which, despite tons of cryptographers and armchair detectives,
Right.
still unsolved today.
The unsolved ciphers became like a holy grail
Yeah.
for code breakers and true crime enthusiasts.
Right.
Because they represent this tantalizing possibility that somewhere in those symbols
Yeah.
is the key to unlocking the Zodiac's identity. Who is he?
It's like he's inviting us to play his game,
Right.
even after all these years.
Still today, yeah. And that's the thing, this unsolved mystery, the ciphers, these taunting letters, no definitive ending.
Right.
It all just keeps people fascinated and intrigued.
It's true, the Zodiac wasn't just a criminal. He became this cultural figure, a boogeyman, this shadow over the Bay Area and beyond.
Right.
But even with the attacks and the ciphers, the question of how many victims he actually claimed is a bit of a rabbit hole.
Yeah, he boasted of 37 murders in his letters.
Wow.
But investigators have only definitively linked him to 5.
Right.
But there are a number of other cases that have been investigated for potential connections.
Yeah.
Which leads to a lot of speculation.
Okay, so let's dive into some of these possible victims and see if we can separate fact from fiction.
Okay.
One that stands out to me is the 1963 murders of Robert Domingos and Linda Edwards.
Okay, yeah.
Young couple shot to death on a beach near Gaviota.
Right.
It predates the Zodiac's known activity by quite a few years, but there are some eerie similarities.
The murder weapon in that case was a .22 caliber pistol, same one used in some of the Zodiac attacks.
Right.
And that location, a secluded beach, it fits his early pattern.
Yeah.
However, there are some differences too.
Yeah.
The killer tried to burn the bodies in the Gaviota case,
Right.
which the Zodiac never did with his confirmed victims.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder if we're so eager to connect the dots that we overlook these discrepancies.
Yeah, sometimes you can get caught up in it, right?
Yeah.
You want to solve it so bad.
What about Churi Jo Bates, her murder in 1966?
Right.
That's another one that's often linked to the Zodiac.
That one's interesting because he actually claimed responsibility for it in a letter
Really?
years after the murder, but that claim came after the case had received a bunch of media attention.
Right.
So there's always been this doubt, was he really involved or was he just trying to insert himself into a high-profile case?
So we're trying to decipher not only his ciphers, but his motives and his claims.
Exactly.
Were any other possible victims investigated?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In 1970, there was this chilling attempted kidnapping
Oh, wow.
of Kathleen Johns and her baby daughter.
Oh, God.
They were driving on a highway when this man who said he had car trouble offered them a ride.
Yeah.
Kathleen was able to escape with her daughter, but later she identified this man from a police composite as the Zodiac.
So we have a potential victim who actually survived an encounter with the Zodiac.
It's crazy.
That's incredible.
It really adds another layer to his persona, right? He wasn't just some phantom, a name in a letter.
Right.
He was a real person who could interact with his victims and have this terrifying control over them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And then there's Donna Lass, a nurse who vanished from Lake Tahoe in 1970.
right.
Her body was never found. But a victim 12 letter sent to a journalist had some details that some believe are connected to her disappearance.
The last case is a tough one because without a body,
Right.
it's so hard to determine what happened to her.
Yeah.
Did the Zodiac take her? Did he have nothing to do with it and was just trying to keep people focused on him?
Right.
We just don't know.
It's one of those questions that just keeps the case alive in people's minds
Absolutely.
and makes you think about the impact on the families of these potential victims.
Right.
Just not knowing, having to live with that uncertainty.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
So, with all these possible victims, some with stronger links than others, the question becomes, did he stop killing after Paul Stein, or did he just stop claiming responsibility?
Right.
Did he die? Was he imprisoned for another crime? Did he just fade back into the shadows?
It's a question that has haunted investigators for years and years. And it's that lack of an answer that keeps people so fascinated with the Zodiac case. He's this enigma, a symbol of the unknown, and maybe a reflection of our own anxieties about all the darkness in the world.
Okay, so we've talked about the victims, the ciphers, the MO, but the question everyone wants to know is, who was the Zodiac?
Right.
Did the police ever get close to catching him?
Well, there were thousands of suspects investigated over the years.
Wow.
Tips came in from all over, some credible, some not so much.
Right.
But only one suspect was ever publicly named by the police.
Okay.
Arthur Lee Allen.
Okay, so tell us about Arthur Lee Allen.
Yeah.
What made him the prime suspect?
Allen was a convicted child molester, and he lived in Vallejo, not far from some of the attacks.
Okay.
And there were a number of things that pointed to him. He owned a watch that matched the one thought to be worn by the Zodiac,
Wow.
and he was identified by one of the surviving victims.
Really?
Although that identification came years after the attack.
So if there was that much circumstantial evidence, why wasn't he ever charged?
Well, here's where it gets even more frustrating.
Okay.
DNA evidence collected from Allen didn't match samples taken from the crime scenes. And despite all that circumstantial evidence, there wasn't enough to definitely connect him to the murders.
So a prime suspect, a mountain of circumstantial evidence, and then inconclusive DNA testing.
Yep.
I can see why this case is so frustrating.
Yeah.
It's like one step forward, two steps back.
Exactly. And, Allen died in 1992, and with his death, the hope of getting a confession or finding more evidence seemed to go away, too.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean the investigation stopped.
Right.
Over the years, several other suspects have come up,
Like who?
including some pretty big names like Ted Bundy and the Unabomber.
Wow, those are some big names.
Yeah. But while there might be some similarities in their MO or where they were,
Yeah.
there's no hard evidence connecting them to the Zodiac crimes.
So they're just theories.
Yeah, just theories.
It seems like we keep hitting this wall of not enough evidence. Is there any hope that with all the advances in DNA technology, we might one day get a definitive answer?
I think there's always hope.
Yeah.
Genealogy websites have been really successful in solving cold cases lately.
It's amazing.
And they could be used to analyze DNA samples from the Zodiac case.
Okay.
If investigators can get a usable sample, they might be able to use these websites to find relatives of the killer
Wow.
and eventually narrow down the search.
That's incredible. After all these years, technology that wasn't even around when the crimes happened could be the key to solving the case.
Technology has really changed the game when it comes to investigations.
For sure.
But it's important to remember it's not a magic solution.
Right.
The success of genealogical DNA testing depends on having good samples and finding matches in the databases.
Okay.
There's no guarantee it'll work in the Zodiac case, but it gives us some hope.
Yeah.
You know.
It's almost like a race against time. Can we unlock these secrets of the past before they're lost forever?
Exactly, and that's what makes these cases so compelling. That
Yeah.
They remind us that the past isn't really gone.
Right.
The echoes of these crimes are still here today, and the search for truth and justice, no matter how long it takes, is important.
Couldn't said it better myself. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've walked through the attacks, explored the mystery of the ciphers, delved into the world of victims and suspects, and even touched on the possibility of new technology cracking this decades-old case. But as we wrap up part 2 of our deep dive, I have a question for you, our listener. Knowing what we know now, do you think Arthur Lee Allen was the Zodiac, or is there something else, some other clue or connection that we've missed? Think about it, and we'll be back with part 3, where we'll answer more listener questions and offer some final thoughts on this enduring mystery. Welcome back to the deep dive. You've been with us through this whole journey into the Zodiac case, and now we're going to see what stands out to you. We asked for your questions, and wow, you guys delivered.
A lot of great questions.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. It seems like the mystery of the Zodiac's identity really sparked your curiosity.
Yeah.
We got a lot of questions about the suspects, especially Arthur Lee Allen, and whether there was any chance he could actually be innocent.
Yeah, that's a good question. We did go over a lot of the circumstantial evidence that seemed to point to him.
Right.
Then that DNA testing just kind of threw everything off.
It really did. So knowing what we know now, could he have been wrongly accused?
It's possible. The DNA evidence we have definitely makes his guilt seem less likely.
Right.
But it doesn't completely rule him out. Remember, DNA technology was pretty new back then.
Yeah.
And those samples could have degraded over time, where there's always a chance of contamination or mistakes in the lab.
So it's not a simple yes or no.
Nope, it's another layer of uncertainty in a case that's already full of them.
Exactly. And that's what makes these cold cases so fascinating and so frustrating.
Absolutely.
We have these puzzle pieces, but will we ever be able to put them together with total certainty?
Who knows?
We also got a lot of questions about the Zodiac's psychology. What kind of person could commit these crimes and then just seem to revel in all the attention?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, The Zodiac definitely craved notoriety.
Yeah.
He went to great lengths to stage his crimes, leave his mark, and taunt the public. His letters are just full of boasts, threats, and these bizarre symbols,
Right.
all meant to shock and intimidate.
It's like he wanted to build this legend around himself.
Exactly. He wanted to be bigger than life, and that need for attention, combined with how brutal his crimes were,
Yeah.
it really suggests a deeply disturbed person.
Right.
Maybe someone with narcissistic personality disorder or even psychopathic tendencies.
You also wrote in with a lot of questions about the ciphers.
Oh, yeah.
Some of you wanted to know if there were any new developments in breaking those unsolved ones.
Well, there hasn't been a confirmed breakthrough, but people are still really interested in these ciphers, and new code-breaking techniques are always being developed.
Yeah.
So there's always that chance someone somewhere will crack the code.
Imagine if that happened. What if hidden within those symbols, we found the Zodiac's name or a confession or some vital clue that finally solved the case?
That's the hope that keeps so many people engaged with this case.
Right.
It's the possibility that even after all this time, there's still something to discover.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of unlocking secrets, several listeners asked about new technologies like artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Could AI help solve the case?
It's definitely an area worth exploring.
Okay.
AI can analyze huge amounts of data,
Right.
looking for patterns and connections that we might miss. It could look at the Zodiac's writing his word choices, the crime locations, even when he sent his messages,
Yeah.
and maybe uncover new leads.
That sounds like a sci-fi movie.
I know.
Computer program helping us catch a ghost from the past.
And it might sound crazy, but it's not impossible. We're already seeing AI being used in investigations.
That's true.
So it's not that big of a leap to imagine it being used for cold cases like this one.
We also had a lot of questions about the wider impact of the Zodiac case. Why does this story still fascinate us after all these years?
I think there are a few reasons. The unsolved mystery, obviously the chilling nature of the crimes, the media frenzy, and the Zodiac's own efforts to be mysterious and menacing.
It's like he tapped into our deepest fears.
Yeah.
You know, the
Yeah.
fear of the unknown, that anyone, even someone who seems ordinary, could be capable of terrible things.
Right, and that fear mixed with the desire to solve the puzzle,
Yeah.
to make sense of something senseless, keeps us coming back to this case, trying to figure out what motivated him, why he did it, and who he really was.
Well, we're nearing the end of our deep dive, and as always, I want to thank you, our listener, for joining us. The mystery remains a reminder that some secrets are incredibly tough to crack, even with time and technology. Maybe one day those secrets will be revealed, but until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop diving deep.